Okay. Um, yeah, so good morning. Welcome to the sixth lecture. So we would be continuing our discussion on dynamic programming. So I already got a question from the last lecture. So Harshal is asking that, can we go over the proof by contradiction part of the optimal substructure thing once again? So the point is that today also we would be talking about a very similar thing. So yeah, if anybody has any question even after that regarding the proof, then please feel free to ask. So I'll go over a bit slowly over the proof today. I'm not audible. Can everyone hear me?
Yes, sir, you are audible.
Okay, thanks. Yeah. Uh, Okay, so the problem that would be our next candidate in order to study dynamic programming is the very classical and well-known knapsack problem. Okay, before we go further, so someone's video is still on, so I would request him. So Suraj, your video is on. Please switch your video off. Okay, thanks. Uh, okay, so knapsack is really like a poster child of dynamic programming, and it's an age-old problem, but still everywhere in the world, people just it's a great way to like really understand the power of dynamic programming. So we would be discussing this problem today. So let's see what the problem is. So the problem has a kind of a funny backstory that suppose there's a thief who has entered a house with a knapsack on his back, and there are lots of items in the house, right? Now, in his head, the thief has a notion of how much value will each item give him in return. But of course, he cannot pack every item that is available, right? So he can only steal so much. How much? As much as it fits into his sack. Yeah, he does not want to break his sack or something like that. Um, so now the question is, how should the thief pick the set of items? Okay, so there is a value attached with every item, and he cannot overload his sack. So how would he optimize the total value that he can steal from that house for that night? Okay, so that's the sort of the funny connotation to this problem. But really, if I want to define the problem formally, then I'm given a knapsack of size W, and I'm given a set of n different items which are indivisible. This is very important, and you will realize why this is important. So all the items are indivisible, meaning that you cannot take any fraction of a specific item. You have to either not take it or take the whole of that item. Okay. Now each item comes with a weight, and each item has a value attached to it. So we will be assuming that all these numbers which I'm showing here, capital W, small wi, small vi, each and every one of this are non-negative integers. And for this problem, although the problem is still well defined, even if the values, let's say, are negative, but in order to be able to design the algorithm, actually the values can still be negative, but it's very important that the W's are non-negative. Okay, so it's very important that the W's must be non-negative integers. Otherwise, the algorithm that we are going to talk about at the end of the day, that will not make sense if the W's are negative or the Wi's are fractional. Okay, so that you should keep in mind. Values can be negative actually, now that I think about it. Okay, so is the problem clear to everyone? Very simple. So let's just see an example. I think it should be clear. So let's say that these 5 items are available to me. Yeah, items 1 to 5, and each one has a weight and a corresponding value attached to it. Okay, and let's say the total weight that you can pack is so the value of the okay, there is something wrong here. Sorry. These two should be interchanged. I'm sorry. So these are the values. Okay. And this is the weight. Sorry, guys. Okay. And the total amount of weight that you can pack is 11. Okay, so that's your instance. So what do you think is the optimal solution here? What is the best that you can do just by looking at it? Yeah, so I can take items 3 and 4, right? And that's actually, that will fill my knapsack exactly to its brim. I cannot pack any more items, and that will give me a value of 40. Why? Because, yeah, so if I just take these 2 items, then it gives me a value of 40. Yeah, very simple. So now you can imagine that there could be several ways of filling your knapsack. And now we were trying to solve the non-trivial problem of figuring out the best combination of items. Yeah, so the one which maximizes the value that that is achievable. Okay, so again, just like last time, before even going into dynamic programming and stuff, we should try out some intuitive ideas. Although again, I'm a bit guilty here because I have not formally introduced greedy algorithms to you. But in this case, even if I have never told you what a greedy algorithm means, there could be a greedy way of choosing the items in order to fill up the knapsack. So what could be a greedy choice? So it's like an iterative greedy algorithm if you want to think. Okay, so Dhairya is saying picking the max, and I think Mudit had also answered, is the max of what is the question. So one answer could be you take the maximum value item. Okay, so that could be one option. One could be the minimum weight item. So there could be several of these options. But what makes sense really is the ratio of the value and the weight. Maybe that's the greedy choice that makes most sense, right? Because remember, if you pick the item which has the which gives the maximum value per weight, then that is the most bang for bucks, or as we call it, right? So you are packing minimum amount of weight and you are sort of getting the maximum value out of it. So ideally, we should be sorting them in the decreasing or non-increasing ratio of value over weight and just keep picking it unless we overload our knapsack. Okay. Now, is this a good algorithm? Okay. Yeah. So of course, because I'm asking, this is not a good algorithm. So as we can see, yeah. So this is the greedy choice. So if you think about the example carefully, then this greedy choice, it will actually pick the item 5, 2, and 1. Okay. So why should it pick 5? Because yeah, clearly, again, please consider these are opposite, right? So these are the values and these are the weights. Okay. So clearly this ratio is highest for item 5. So it will pack item 5 first. But the moment it pack item 5, then already it has put an item of weight 7. So the remaining space in the knapsack is only 4. So it has no option but to only pack either item 1 or item 2. But even if I pack both the items, it can only give me an additional value of whatever it is, right? 7. So the total value I get is 35, which is clearly less than what the optimal solution is here, which is 40, as we saw. Okay. But again, this is not a bad algorithm in the sense that it actually runs fast. And, maybe in some cases it will actually, it's a reasonable heuristic. Okay. So there is a question. Let me see. Does this work if we don't have to take all the weight of a particular item? That's an excellent question. So exactly. So the point is, if you are allowed to take fractional items, then you can prove that this is always going to be an optimal algorithm. That's a very, very good point. Okay. So because what you can do is, whatever the remaining space is, you can just put up some, you can just fill it with a fraction of the remaining item or something like that. For example, in this case, well, let's say you packed the entire item 5, but then the next highest ratio is probably whatever it is. Let's say it's item 4. Then maybe you cannot pack the entire item 4, but you can take a fraction of it. Yeah. So yeah, if that was allowed, then this algorithm will actually give you the optimal solution. So I'm not proving it here because that again goes into the regime of proving correctness of greedy algorithms. Maybe when we speak of greedy algorithms, we can try to prove it, but it's really simple. You can easily prove this by induction or something. But that's a very good point. Yeah. And this is why we are assuming, not assuming, it's an additional constraint on the problem, on this problem, that the items are indivisible. That's what makes the problem way more interesting. Yeah. And it's very practical. In many practical scenarios, although I am stating the problem in a very sort of a funny way of a thief carrying a knapsack and entering a house, but it really it forms the basis of several resource allocation kind of problem, which we continuously solve in communication networks or operating systems and whatnot. Okay, scheduling and all that. All right. Any other question? So I hope the problem now has started to make sense to everyone. Okay. Now, how should we go about designing an algorithm is the question. So again, what I would like to impress upon you is, even before designing an algorithm, please just think for 5 minutes about how the optimal solution looks like. Yeah, we don't know the optimal solution, but at least we should try to understand the optimal solution first. Okay, there's another question. If we replace weight by quantity, that will also be a knapsack problem. Okay, so Basam, the point is that you can think about yeah. So the point is, you can think about any sort of packing scenario, right? It doesn't have to be weight. No, I think I know why Basam is asking the question, because maybe in some scenarios weight might not be the most natural thing. So any quantity for which indivisibility thing makes sense, you can define the knapsack problem. Yeah. So it does not matter. Can we have multiple items of the same type? Yeah, so that is just like several items having the same weight. That is clearly allowed, Gaurav. Yeah, it does not matter to us. All the items can be of the same weight, ideally. That's in some scenario. That's okay. Yeah, our algorithm will not be affected by anything of that sort. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, so I am not assuming that the weights are distinct. Okay, although in this example, the weight seems distinct, but neither the weights nor the values have to be distinct. So they could be just all the same. That's okay. Oh no, oh Gaurav. So that's a different thing. So here I am only giving you one copy of the item. So if I gave you 2 copies of the item, then you could have taken both the copies. So what Gaurav is asking is, why can't I do 2 to 5? No, you cannot pick 2 twice. Okay, so that's a harder problem that you are asking. That it's not a harder problem actually. It's a different instance of the problem really, where you have 2 copies of the same item. Yeah, but this is not that instance. Good. Right. Okay. So great. So now let's start to understand the structure of the optimal solution. And in order to be able to do that, let me define this notation. Okay. So what is opti? So just like we did in the previous lecture, remember we had this, I don't know what, what notation we had used, tab I or something like that. So what is opti? Well, opti is the optimal solution. Yeah, please think about it very carefully. So I'm saying that opti is the optimal solution if I only give you the items 1 through I. Okay. Please remember, these items are not given in any sorted order, right? It's like any order. So just arbitrarily name the items 1 to I. It does not matter. The order does not matter. Although again, in this table, I'm showing in some sort of sorted order, but there is nothing like that. So you are just given the items E1 to En. Okay. So now let us define opti as the optimal solution if I restricted the instance to items 1 through I, and I gave you a knapsack of size W. Okay, so I'm talking about a somewhat smaller subproblem here, And remember, in order to be able to design dynamic programming algorithms, we would require to be able to define these subproblems. These subproblems are really what drives the algorithms. Yeah. So that's a subproblem. That's a clearly defined subproblem. Now, just like last time, let us try to understand how this optimal solution can look like. And again, we would be doing a case analysis. Okay. So what is going to be the first case? So again, there could be only two cases. If I look at the last item, which is item number I, again, there could be only two cases. So the first case is that item I is not part of the optimal solution. Okay. So again, remember, I'm not talking of any algorithm. I'm just looking at an optimal solution. And I'm looking at the scenario where the last item, which is item I, is not part of the knapsack. Okay. Now, I claim that if that's the case, then opt I minus I is exactly equal to opt I. Okay. So if I take the solution opt I, and if I have this information that the last item does not belong to this solution, then I claim that this solution is also optimal if I just consider the item 1 to I minus 1. Okay. So there is a question. So the question is, do they represent value or not? So it does not matter. I don't know who asked this question. Let's see. So Yash, it's just a notation. It's think of these as labels to your item. So these are the labels of the item. So remember, in this table, I'm showing these labels, right? Item number 1, item number 2, and so on and so forth. Yeah, these are just indices to define the subproblem. Okay, they are not values. Values are V sub I, right? And weights are W sub I. Okay. So what's the point we're trying to make here? The point we're trying to make here is that if the last item is not part of the optimal solution, then this solution, jo opt I ke liye optimal hai, this is also a solution to opt I minus 1. Okay. Now, since somebody asked me for the proof of contradiction, let me just write this one-line proof. Okay. So what's the proof? So suppose this is not true. So suppose opt I minus 1 is not equal to opt I in this case. Okay. And let's say opt prime I minus 1 is optimal for 1 through I minus 1 and W. Okay. So this is how you formally write the proofs. Okay. And okay. So by the way, yesterday I saw that many of you had submitted this tutorial solutions. So all of you understand the solutions correctly, which is very nice. But what is also important that when you write the solutions in an assignment or in an exam, you need to give this 1 or 2 line argument. Okay, so only the algorithm is not sufficient. This is something which we want to learn in this course, how to formally argue correctness of algorithms. And typically this is how we should do it. Okay, so that's why I'm sometimes showing you these things in a bit more detail. Okay, so suppose for contradiction that there is another solution for item 1 to I minus 1, and that is opt prime I minus 1. And this has a value which is greater than opt I minus 1. So why does this lead to a contradiction now? What is the contradiction here?
So because by the definition of the subproblem, opt I minus 1 is the optimal solution from 1 to I minus 1.
Exactly. So this implies that opt prime I minus 1 is also optimal for 1 through I. Okay, and that's a contradiction, right? Because now we have a solution which has value opt prime I minus 1, which is bigger than opt I. Yeah, which clearly cannot be the case. So it has to be the case that this holds. Okay, so that leads to the contradiction. Yeah, so agar wo optimal tha for 1 to I, then isko bhi optimal hona padega. But this is the easier case. There is, as you can understand, there would be a slightly more complicated case. So let's get on with that. But is this part clear to everyone? Yeah, this is only one case of how the optimal solution can look like. All right. So what is the other case now? So the other case is that item I is part of the optimal solution. So now I really take item I. Now here is where it will start to look a bit different from what we did in the last class. Okay. And the first difference that you should note is that, remember last time we said that because we were not allowing, so if I pick one ball, I will not allow any of the neighboring balls to be picked. So the moment I tell you that item I is part of an optimal solution, you could have discarded the item I minus 1 and focused on the remaining subproblem. But now you cannot do something like this. Yeah, rejection of item I from the optimal solution, inclusion of item I in the optimal solution does not necessarily mean that you have to reject item I minus 1 in this optimal solution. Item I minus 1 can very well be the part of the optimal solution. There is no restriction. Yeah. So the only restriction, remember, is that we should not exceed the total weight of the knapsack. Of the total weight of the items that I'm packing, that should not exceed the total capacity of the knapsack. All right. So is this part clear? So this is the first line of difference from the previous thing. All right. Okay. All that is well and good. But now let's think about this. Can we really reduce the problem to opt I minus 1 now? Okay. Can we claim that, you know, just like last time, can I claim that the optimal solution to the whole problem is just the optimal solution to I minus 1 and plus the value of the last item, something similar to what we did last time? Can we claim that? And if not, then why not? Okay, there are a few answers. So here is the issue. So, okay, so let's understand what I'm trying to say here. So suppose this is the set of your items that you have picked. Okay. And I know that item I has been picked in your solution. Okay. And the capacity is W here. Right. Okay. So now the case I am in is that ye jo item I hai, this is part of my solution. Now what I was hoping to claim is that, okay, if I now look at the smaller subproblem, what is the smaller subproblem? The smaller subproblem is item 1 to I minus 1 and the knapsack of size W. So I want to be able to make a statement as follows, that if I take that optimal solution and I add the value of the last item or include the last item, then this forms an optimal solution to the bigger problem, which is opt I. Okay, so this is what I want to say. So want is opt I is equal to opt I minus 1 plus the value of Vi. Okay, but the question is, can I say this now? And clearly I cannot say this anymore. Why can't I say this? Because, you know, when I'm thinking about opt I minus 1, I could have already filled up the whole knapsack. So there is no way that I can now include, I can now include the last item. Okay. So what's the problem here? The problem really is in the way we have defined our subproblem. Okay. So the lesson we are learning through this exercise is that definition of the correct subproblem is really the key to designing a dynamic programming algorithm. Okay. And because we were trying to take inspiration from the last thing which we did, here we are running into a bit of a trouble, right? Because this is not a feasible solution to one is not carrying over to a feasible solution to the bigger problem. Everyone understands this very clearly. Okay. Please feel free to ask me if something is not clear. Okay, good. Okay, so yeah, this is what exactly what I have just said. I just wrote it down properly. That now what? So okay. So what should be the idea now? So the idea would be that, okay, so clearly if I take the items 1 through I minus 1 and still keep my knapsack size to be W, then that subproblem is useless for me. But which subproblem can be useful for me? Okay, so let's think about it. What is a subproblem that could possibly be useful for me? So if I am able to pack items 1 through I minus 1 optimally in a knapsack that is of size W minus Wi, capital W minus capital W, small wi, then this solution suddenly becomes useful to me. Why? Because clearly, if I take this solution and I add item I, right, then this forms a feasible solution to opt-I. Okay, that is the whole point. Right? So the moment I say that, okay, now I'm defining the subproblem in a slightly different way, I am not only restricting myself to items 1 through I minus 1, but I am also restricting the capacity of the knapsack to W minus small wi. Then I can claim that the optimal solution to the whole thing will be the, if I forget about item I, then the remaining thing will be an optimal solution to W minus Wi. Okay, and it's the same proof by contradiction. So the way you will prove this is the following. You will say that suppose there exists a different optimal solution to the smaller subproblem with items 1 through I minus 1 and a knapsack of size W minus Wi. But now you can take this optimal solution and you can append this to with the item I, with the value of item I, which gives you a better solution for opt-I, which is a contradiction. Okay, so if this is optimal, so if opt-I is optimal for 1 through I and a knapsack of size W, then the remaining items has to be the optimal for the remaining subproblem. Okay, so that is the whole lesson that we have learned, right? Great. So now, yeah, so now it's all about just formalizing this idea. Yeah. So how do we formalize? Now we add a second index to our subproblem, which are the weights. Yeah. So opt I comma W is the best that you can do. So the optimal solution, considering the items 1 through I and a knapsack of size small w. Yeah. And now I guess you should start to realize why it's important to have the W's defined to be non-negative integers. Because ye agar negative hota, if I allow negative weights in my problem, then this definition of subproblem will not make sense at all. You cannot even apply induction. Not induction. What I mean is that you cannot even define the subproblems. Yeah, because what does a negative, a negative index does not mean anything, right? We cannot do anything with that. Okay. So now that we have defined a subproblem like this, how should I formally write the two cases? Okay. So case one is easy, right? Case one would simply be okay. So then opt I comma W. What is this going to be? So how should I write this in terms of a smaller subproblem if I is not part of opt I comma W? Exactly. So I will then just solve I minus 1 comma W. And how about the other case? So in this case, what should I say? Right. So this is opt I minus 1 comma W minus Wi plus Vi. Very important. Yeah. Otherwise, it does not make sense. Why should you only solve? Yeah, exactly. Very good. Okay. So just like, remember again, like in the previous class, we could narrow down the structure of the optimal solution to two cases. Even here, by this slightly advanced definition of subproblem, now we are in a two-dimensional subproblem regime. we are still able to narrow down our optimal solution to only these two cases. Okay, sir, if negative weights were allowed, we would always keep items with negative weights and then apply same algo for rest of items and add the two results. Probably you are right. So you are saying that it does not hurt to just take all the items that have negative weights. That cannot, yeah, that's true. That's true. Yeah. Yeah, but I think Mudit has raised a valid point here. If the values are negative now, so suppose there is an item of negative weight and negative value, then it's not clear what to do. Then you still need to put those, then you still need to consider the negative weight items into this framework, and then you would again run into trouble. Yes, I think he's correct. Okay. Right. Yeah, that's absolutely correct. Because the moment, yeah, because then you cannot say that, okay, I will take all the items which are of negative weight. Okay, so then you have to solve a different problem, maybe with all the negative items, and then do the best thing. But that's not clear. Yeah. So that's a good question, Siddharth. What is negative weight? So as I said that this problem, it's not clear what negative weight is, but there are certain scheduling problems, right? Where, sometimes you can do certain things which somehow allows you more resource. Yeah, it's a bit hard for me to spell it out everything. Everything now, but there are certain scenarios where it can be useful. Okay, adding negative weights, negative values can be adding negative weights with positive values would work though. The idea, so what you are saying is, why can't I offset the negative values with some positive weights? That's what you are saying, right? So let's say I add everything. So I take the most negative value and let's say that number is minus n, and I add a plus capital N to every weight or something, right? Yeah, so I think all these needs to be thought about carefully. I don't think they work directly, right? Because the moment you add an offset to every value, then your optimal solution might change. Yeah, so think about it. Let's say that you have two optimal solutions. Okay, so I'm just answering Dhairya's question. So what she said is that, why can't I just add some positive weight to all the negative weights? So the problem is that, suppose there are two optimal solutions to your problem. One takes 3 items and the other one takes 4 items. Now the issue is, if you add a fixed value to everyone, then one of the optimal solutions does not remain an optimal solution anymore. Okay, so these things need to be thought about very carefully. Yeah. So one of the optimal solutions might not remain an optimal solution, and things might go messy now. Yeah. So you cannot. Which is why. So all I'm saying is that, suppose there are multiple optimal solutions, right? So suppose one optimal solution takes 3 items and the other optimal solution takes 4 items. Now you are adding a fixed quantity to every value. So now the one which had 4 items in the original problem, uska total value abhi, it's strictly greater than the solution which had 3 items. So now the structure of the optimal changes, right? Your optimal solutions change in the final problem. Is all I'm saying. Yeah. This is only if we have negative values. Yeah. But I'm saying that you cannot just add some offset to everything. Okay. So let's move on. Yeah, I think let's not worry about negative weights too much. All right. So this part is clear, right? Okay. So now, although we have seen the proofs in a more or less hand wavy way, But let me again do one proof properly. Okay, so how do you prove? Now, suppose you have written this two sort of recursive way of stating the optimal solutions, but how do you prove the correctness? Because remember, you are going to turn this into an algorithm eventually. So how do you prove the correctness of these two recursions? Okay, now, although now that we have discussed so much, this might seem trivial, but something very deep is actually going on here, which is, remember, typically when we do induction, typically it's on only one variable in some sense. Yeah, we typically write a predicate that, okay, suppose Pn means this. Now let's say P1 to Pn minus 1 is true. So now we show that, okay, then Pn must be true. But remember, now we have two indices. So this is something which is somewhat more non-trivial than the typical induction that we carry out. Okay, so this is an induction on two parameters essentially. Okay, or in other words, we will be required strong induction on two parameters. So how should we go about? So let's prove the second case, because that is more that is sort of more interesting and maybe somewhat tricky. Okay, not very tricky, but somewhat tricky. So what is going to be our predicate first? So the predicate is, so let's say P I comma W is that the recursion is correct for all values I equals to 0 to let's say I, and okay, this is weird, not 0 to I. Let's say K equals to 0 to I and L equals to 0 to W. Okay, so that is the statement that we are trying to prove here. Yeah. Now, one thing you will notice that I have introduced the zeros in the indices, which I didn't do previously. But this is clearly so that, you know, we are able to design the algorithm, and also it makes the proof easier. In other words, we are defining the base cases. So let's first think about the base cases. What would be the base cases? What do you think? What should you take as base cases in this proof? So what should be the value of I and W for the base cases? Okay, good. So the point is, the way I will define the base case is the following, right? So base cases, so actually there are multiple cases, which are P, 0 and L for all L equals to 0, 1 up to W. Okay. Now let's see if this makes sense or not. Oh, sorry, this is equal to 0. Yeah. So let's say if this makes sense or not. What is this really saying? I mean, this is a fictitious case. This is saying that your first index is 0, which means that you are not taking any item and you are allowing some capacity of the knapsack, which starts at 0 and ends at small w. Now, clearly, then the profit you can get is sort of 0, right? Because you're not taking any item, so the profit is 0. Yeah. So this is just to be able to define the base cases cleanly. Yeah. This is a fictitious thing. It does not make sense to take no item, but yeah. So this is just to be able to figure out the base case. So is this clear? So I'm defining multiple base cases basically. Yeah. I'm fixing the value of I to be 0, and I'm taking all the values of L starting from 0 to small w, and those form my base cases. Okay. So now let's prove the inductive case. So induction, right? And I'm only going to show you the case 2. Yeah. So case 2 is when, when the last item is not part of the, it is part of the optimal solution. Okay. So suppose item I is part of the solution opt I, comma W. Okay. And now we are going to use strong induction. And this is why it's very important to use strong induction here, right? I have to be able to say that the induction hypothesis is true for every value of I starting from 1 to I minus 1 and all possible weights which are strictly less than W, okay? Or less than or equal to W. Yeah. Yeah, so we would be, this is, sorry. Yeah, that's correct. So let me write it differently. So let me write, suppose item K is part of the solution, opt K, comma L. Okay, is this fine now? Is this consistent with the indices of the induction? So we are trying to prove the induction for, so we are trying to prove P, K, comma L here. Yeah, so I'm looking at opt K, comma L. And I'm taking the case where the item K is part of this optimal solution. Yeah. Okay. So now by strong induction, P K minus 1, comma L minus WI, WL is true. Okay. And now this should imply, yeah, Karanjot, I will come to why strong induction is necessary. This implies that opt L is equal to opt K minus 1 L minus WL plus the value of item L. Yeah. So this part is again by the contradiction that we have talked about again and again, right? So I'm not writing that in detail, but this is how you should write the induction part. So Karanjot is asking, why is strong induction necessary? So Karanjot, the reason strong induction is necessary because typically when we do induction, when we just V underscore K, right? Yeah. So when we do induction, we just use weak induction. We just use the last. So when we are trying to prove Pi, we just use Pi minus 1. But here, remember, it's not sufficient to only consider Pi minus 1. Okay, it's sufficient to consider K minus 1. But if I look at the second index, then I don't know what the value of WL is. So L minus WL is not really L minus 1. So this is why you need this induction hypothesis to be true for all the values that are from, so let's say, okay, we really don't need it for all the Ks, we just need it for K minus 1, but we need it for all the values of L. So we need it for all the values of L starting from 0 up until, let's say, L. Yeah, otherwise I cannot even make this statement. Good. So this is how you should write, proofs when, okay. Any other question? Okay, good. Great. So now, it's just a matter of converting this whole idea into an algorithm. And of course, now we have to take a 2-dimensional array instead of a 1-dimensional array. So yeah, so let's say M equal to 2D array of size n times W. Okay, and that you initialize with some entries like invalid or something. And now this forms your base cases. This essentially your base cases translate to this part, which is that for the index I equals to 0, I just make, no. Oh, sorry. I'm doing something foolish here. Okay. This is the recursive thing. This is not the iterative thing. Okay. I'm sorry. This is the recursive algorithm. Okay. So what I'm doing is first I'm checking if the index is 0 or not. If the index is 0, then I just make the entry to be 0. So mi comma w is 0, no matter what my w is. Okay, otherwise I am in one particular case that can happen is that wi is actually bigger than w. So the weight of the current item is actually bigger than w. Okay. Now, if that is the case, then what does it mean? Well, it means that I cannot even take this item. I cannot fit this, even this single item, I cannot fit into my knapsack. Okay. So then clearly I should just inherit the solution, which is I minus 1 and knapsack size W. So this is really a corner case that we have to consider very carefully. Because remember, if I don't consider this, then W minus Wi will become negative, and then you will run into all sorts of trouble. So this checking is important. Yeah, and physically it also makes sense. You have a knapsack of size small w. If the weight of your single item is more than that, then you of course cannot pack that into the knapsack. Okay, so that's one case. And now we come to the main the main part of the recursion. So we say that MIW is going to be just one of these two cases that we have thought about. So one is nap I minus 1 comma W. The other one is nap I minus 1 and W minus WI plus V of I. Okay. So any questions about this recursion? This is still a recursive algorithm, but clearly it uses this table. So yeah, it's not going to really recurse on every possible, I mean, it's not going to recurse again and again on the same subproblems. Yeah, so this is still using memoization. Okay, great. And now, just like last time, this can be easily converted to an iterative algorithm. Yeah, and the iterative algorithm just proceeds as follows. That first I fill up sort of the entries for the indices 0, all the entries which are of the form 0, small w for all w from 0 to capital W. Yeah, so I just initialize them all to 0. So this is the base case. Yeah, and then I just do the rest. Yeah, so there is a mistake here again. 0 to W equal to 0 to W. Okay, why do we take the max? Why do we take the max of mi minus 1 W in the last case? No, I take the max of these two, right? I take the max of mi minus 1 W and mi minus 1 W minus Wi plus Vi. That's what I'm taking. Ah, why am I doing this? Okay, great. So Ananya, so the point is, remember, so then I have to just go back to this slide. So do you understand that if I look at an optimal solution where I consider items 1 to I and a knapsack of size W, then the optimal solution can be deconstructed into only these two cases. One case is whether you want to include item I, and the other case is when you don't want to include item I. So if you don't want to include item I, then you just inherit the solution with the same size of the knapsack. Yeah. And if you don't want, if you want to include I as part of your solution, then you have to make sure that you are looking at the smaller subproblem with I minus 1 items, and the weight of the knapsack now has to be W minus Wi. And to that you add your value Vi. Yeah, so these are the only two cases, and you just keep taking the max of these two. Okay. Yeah, good. Yeah, please clarify all these doubts. I mean, I understand. What will be the order of filling up the 2D array M? So that's a great question. So the way I have written it here, right? So yeah, again, I had made a mistake here. So this should be W from, let me write it clearly. So for W equal to 0 to W. Okay, so the way I have written here, I am doing it sort of, so the outer loop is going for I equals to 0 to N. So I'm going over all the item indices, and the inner loop is going over all the possible capacities of the knapsack from 0 to capital W. Yeah. But I think in this case, it's also okay if you exchange the ordering. Yeah. So all you have to make sure is that I have not thought through this carefully, but I think so. All you have to make sure is that when you are trying to compute mi comma w, then you should have already computed these two entries. These are the two entries that you will actually require. Okay. So that's important, as long as you can ensure that. So I think in this particular case, even if you have exchanged the order of the loops, it won't matter. You will still get access to the values. Okay, does that make sense? Yes, good. So that's a very good question. So what Dipankar is asking, aren't we iterating over all possible values of weights? Yes, we are iterating on all the possible values of the weights. That's true. In this algorithm, we are doing that. So I will come to that issue in a slide. Okay. So is the algorithm clear to everyone? Okay, Kevin feels that we are doing extra work. Yes, I completely agree with Kevin that a lot of this could be optimized, but just for the sake of this lecture, let's assume that we are going on with a very naive implementation. Okay, so this is the most naive implementation. It's true that you can get rid of some of the, you don't really need to, you can optimize this code. Okay. But for today, let's just stick to the principles. Okay. So let's actually now, just to make sure that we have understood the things correctly, let's quickly go through this example. Okay. So I hope, yeah, it always helps me to understand algorithms better if I run a small example. So let's just quickly go through this example and see how the table entries are going to be filled up. Okay. So what are the rows and what are the columns? Well, the rows correspond to the indices of the items. Okay, but let me write the rows in a slightly more fashionable way. So basically, these are the sub problems as follows. So the first sub problem is when you do not take any item. The second sub problem is when you take an item 1, 2. The third sub problem is when you take items. Sorry, this is only one. The third sub problem is when you take 1 and 2. The next one is when you take 1, 2, and 3. And the next one is when you take 1, 2, 3, and 4. Okay. But the indices are again going to be just 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4. Okay. So those are your items. So this is N. Okay. And W is going in this direction. Right. So what are the values again? So these are 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay. So suppose W equal to 6. Yeah. And these are the weights and values of your items. Okay. So now, yeah. So let's now just run through this algorithm. What is it going to do? Well, in the first, remember, first I'm just filling up the first row of this table. Yeah, this is the first loop that, for a fixed I, which is I equals to 0, I'm just filling up all the weights with 0 because I have nothing else to do here. So that's the most easy part. So these entries will all be 0. Okay. Now let's consider going to the first item. Okay. Now remember there was this check. Okay. So there is this check that if Wi is bigger than W, then I do nothing but inherit the subproblem that is just one row above this particular cell. Okay. Now the weight of the first item is 4, which means that till the values of W3, I have nothing to do but just to inherit the subproblems from above. I will not do anything else. Yes. So I will just inherit 0, 0, 0, and 0. So the first sort of non-trivial task that I have to carry out when I come here is when I come to weight equals to 4. Okay. So now I am at item equals to 1 and weight equals to 4. So which of the two cases do I consider here? Should I inherit the subproblem, which is mi minus 1 comma w, or should I inherit the other subproblem, which is I minus 1 w minus wi plus vi? So do I inherit? Yeah, it's the second one. Yeah. Okay. So how do I actually get the second one? Well, remember, I'm taking I minus 1 and w minus wi. So what's the easiest case to figure that out? Well, I go one row above. Yeah. And I just count 4 places on my left. So I go one above and I just go back 4 places. Why? Because the weight is 4. So I'm subtracting 4 from here. So I just go 4 places back. So this is my mi minus 1 w minus wi, which is 0. But then I add the value of this item to this solution. So that gives me a 3. Okay. So that's how you fill up this entry. Now, I think it's pretty easy to see that these two will also be 3. Yeah, there is not much more you can do here. Okay. Now let's come to index 2. Okay. What is going on here? Well, again, you know, the weight of this item is basically 3. So I know that the first 3 columns, they should just inherit 0. Yeah, because I cannot really pack this item here. Yeah, because the total weight is 3. And if I allow a knapsack of size up to 2, then of course I can do nothing but to just inherit the previous thing. Okay. So these 3 would still be 0. What should be the entry now? So what should be the entry of 2, 3? It's going to be 2. Yeah, I just take the item number 2. Right? So that's going to be my entry. Yeah. Similarly, what is going to be the next entry? Okay. So let's check this a bit carefully. Okay. So when I'm here, what are the 2 options that I should check? Well, one option is which is directly at the top, directly above me. So which is 3. What is the other option? Well, I go above, and how many places on the left do I walk? Well, I walk 3 places on the left. So I go above, I walk 3 places on the left, and I find a value of 0. I add the value of the current item to that, which is 2, right? So the second option is actually giving me 2, while the first option actually gave me 3. So I again inherit 3 here. Okay. So now we are gradually seeing the DP coming to action in a more non-trivial way. Okay. So similarly, you just inherit 3 and 3 here. Okay. So now I'm doing things a bit quickly. So these 2 will be 0. Now this is again the non-trivial case 4. Okay. This will also be 4. This will also be 4. How about this entry now? What is going to be this entry? Who can tell me? So what is going to be the entry M3, 5? Fantastic. So this is going to be 6. Why is this going to be 6? Because, okay, why is it going to be 6? Okay, because one option is 3. The other option is, so I am at item 3, the weight is 2, right? So I just go above one row and then I go 2 places on the left. So which gives me a value of 2 already, which is here. And to that, I add a value of 4. Okay, so that gives me a 6. How about the next one? It's 7, right? It's exactly the same thing. So I go one row above, I go one cell above, I go 2 cells on the left, and then I just get the value of 7. Okay, so let's just finish the final thing. 4, 4, 4. Okay, so these 3 will be just inherited from the subproblem above. Now again, when I come to this entry, so the entry 4, 5, then if you notice, so the weight is 3 here. So you go one row above, one cell above, and then 3 cells on your left. So that gives you a value of 4. And you add the value of the current item, which is also 4. So that gives you a value of 8. And this will also be 8 in a very similar way. Okay. So that's exactly how your DP table is going to be filled up. Okay, and if you notice, 8 is indeed the optimal solution to this problem. And not only that, if you take any of the entries of this particular DP table, then that will give you the optimal solution for that particular entry. So for example, if I ask you, what is the best value that you can get if I give you items 1, 2, 3 and a knapsack of size 6, then you can immediately tell me that the answer is going to be 7. Okay, yeah. Good. So now that we have filled up this table, now again, something which we have glossed over in the code is how do we recover the items? Okay, so that we have not really spoken about. What we have done so far is just filled up the table with the optimal values. So this is something which I won't tell explicitly. I would like you to think about it, that you are again going to do some sort of a backtracking. But please think about it. If you don't understand, then we can discuss this in the next lecture. But I think it will help you understand better. So once you have filled up this table, just think about again, which is the value that I'm interested in? Well, clearly I'm interested in this value. This is my small n comma capital W, M of small n comma capital W, right? So I start at that value, and every time I can just check that what it inherited from. Did I inherit this value from the cell above, or did I inherit this value by going above and a few places on my left? So in this case, clearly I had inherited the value from, I think, this guy, right? So I just place a pointer like that. Okay, so everyone understands what I'm saying? Yeah. So I'm putting a pointer here because this value of 8 was inherited not from the row above, not from the cell above, but from this particular cell. So I took this value 4 and I had added a value of 4 to get 8 here. Okay. And now you can keep backtracking. So now you see 4 and you check where you inherited the value from. Did you inherit from the cell above or the cell on your left? Okay. And this backtracking will actually tell you which are the items that you should choose. Okay. Any questions? Yeah, please figure this out once. And I would actually suggest you to just take a slightly bigger example and work that out yourself. That will make everything very clear. How did we know that we have to go above and move to 3 place back? So Gaurav, are you asking about the backtracking part? So Gaurav is asking, how do we know that we had to go above and move to 3 place back? So is your question related to the backtracking thing? Oh, I see. Okay, good. So Gaurav, we are taking these two cases, right? So suppose, again, very good. Yeah, I'm glad that you are asking these questions. So let's think about the entry, for example. Suppose we are trying to fill up the entry which is 3,6. Gaurav, I'm now answering your question. So how do we get to this value? Okay, so what we are doing is we are checking. So there are two values that we have to check. One is mi-1 comma w. This is the value which is exactly on the cell that is above the 7, above this one. But this gives me a value of 3. What is the other value? Well, I know that the weight of the item 3 is actually 2. Okay, so now you have to check for the row above, but 2 places on your left, because this is W minus Wi. Okay, so when you are at this particular cell, then all you should do is you should move 2 places on the left. Okay, because the weight of this item is 2. So that is why we are moving 2 places on the left. This is just another way of saying this W minus Wi thing. Yeah. So that's why we go to this spot and we get a value of 3. We add a value of 4 to that, and that gives me the 7. Okay. Good. Great. Okay. So I think there was an interesting discussion that why can't we store the items in a data structure when we are moving in the forward direction? Yeah, the problem is, Shruti, that you have to do for every subproblem individually, and that would take up a lot of space. So this is huge wastage, right? Yeah. Okay, Chintan is asking, why don't we use recursion and only calculate the value that we use? So can anybody answer the question for him? So he's curious that, okay, why are we actually computing all these values? Why can't we just take the values that we require? Why can't we just stick with them? So yeah, so the problem, Chintan, here, I think Chintan was the one who asked this question, right? Yeah. So Chintan, the problem is when you are doing a bottom-up approach, you don't know which are the values that you will require. Okay. So that's the whole point, because you don't know what the value of W minus Wi is going to be. You know that value once you have actually reached the item I. So by the time you have reached the item I, you should have all the values at your disposal. You cannot just say that I will only keep certain values, because you have no way of knowing it. Yeah, but it's true that you can still optimize some of the things. Okay, maybe you don't need to store all the values. You can be a bit clever, but in the worst case, you actually need to store all the values. Okay, this is a bit important to understand, that while you are recursing, you have no way of knowing which are the values that you will require. You might require all of them. Yeah. Okay, Basam, which problem statement? The knapsack statement? Yeah. So so you have a knapsack of size capital W. You have n items, let's say 1 to n, and each item has a value Vi and a weight Wi. So you need to maximize the summation of Vi's subject to the fact that the summation of Wi is less than or equal to W, capital W. That's the definition. Yeah. Okay. Any more question? Okay. So in the remaining time, let's discuss a bit about the runtime of this algorithm. Yeah. So first of all, what is going to be the running time? What is the asymptotic worst case running time? Okay. So the running time is actually going to be order n times W. Okay. Now here is my question. Is this polynomial runtime? Okay, good. So Alok is saying yes. Anyone else wants to pitch in? Is this polynomial runtime? Okay, good. So right, very good. So let's discuss this a bit, yeah. And I think this is an opportunity for me to talk a bit about input size of problems. Okay. So so what is the input size? So when we talk about the running time, that is order n or order whatever. Okay. So remember, this n that I am talking about, that is typically the size of the problem. Okay. So which is also known as the input size. Okay. Now let's first understand what is input size. Well, input size is actually computed in terms of the number of bits required to define the problem. Okay. Similarly, output size is defined as the number of bits required to write the output. Okay. So write matlab not in pen and paper, but write on the computer. Write the output. Okay. So if that is the case, then what is the size of this problem? What is it? So if I say S is the input size, so S kya hai yahan pe? For the knapsack problem, what is the size of the input? how many bits do we really require? Okay, so someone is saying log n times w. Is that correct? So think of what are the things that I would like to represent in order to be able to define this problem. What is it that I'm trying to represent? Okay, great. So Utkrisht is saying n times log n plus log of w. Okay. So let's see, why is he saying this? Why is he saying n log n plus log w? So what are the things that I require to be able to define my input? Well, first of all, I have to identify these items. Okay. Now remember, when we write the algorithm on a piece of paper, it seems like, okay, items to aise hi hai, theek hai, n items hai. But remember, when you convert it to the machine code, each of the items essentially has a label to it. Okay. And if there are n items, then you need to be able to write n different labels. Yeah. And each of this label will require a size of roughly log n. Yeah, because any number n, any number between 0 and n can be represented using only log n bits. So for each of the items, just to store the label of these items, you will require n log n bits. However, this is not all. Why is this not all? What else do we require for each item? So it's not enough. Exactly. So we also need to store the weights and the values of these items. Yes, right. So we would need an additional n times, let's say, the max of log. Let me just write log of values, comma, log of weights. Okay. Plus log of w. Okay. Right. So this is essentially my, okay, log of w to pehle hi tha. Okay. So this is the size of my input. Okay. Now, yeah. So the justification of the input size, you mean, Soham? Right. Yeah. So what I mean is that, so you have n items, right? So you have 0 to n items. Now, what Utkrish said was n log n, was n log n. But what I'm saying is that just, so why did he say n log n? Because suppose you are giving a label to each item, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and so on. Now, each of this label will require log n bits. Yeah, because in order to be able to represent, let's say, the number 10, you require 4 bits, right? You cannot do it with less than 4 bits. Okay, so each label takes 4 bits or log n bits, and there are n different labels that you have to maintain. So you need this n log n thing. But what I'm saying is that's not only enough, because each item also has a weight and a value. And in order to be able to represent those, you need log value or log weight number of bits, yeah, times n, because there are n such things. Plus, you need an additional, what am I doing? You need an additional log capital W in order to represent the capacity of the knapsack. Okay. Now, suppose there is a Y max, because the values and weights can be very different, Akhil. So you don't know what range you are working on, right? So let's say the values are very small numbers between 1 and 10, and the weights are huge numbers in millions or billions. Hypothetically, that could be, right? So then you need the maximum of the two, right? Okay, great. So now suppose the following scenario that n is actually very, very tiny. So what I mean is that capital W is much, much bigger than n. Yeah. So let's say it's much, much bigger than any polynomial in n. So let's say it's bigger than n to, in fact, it's bigger than, let's say, 2 to the power of n. Okay. So that can happen, right? I mean, there is no harm in doing that. Okay. So then the point is that then what is the input size really? The input size is essentially then log of W. Okay. So if W is very, very large, then essentially it boils down to the fact that S is log of W, because the other parts, they are essentially absorbed in this log of W. Yes, everyone understands this point. So what I'm saying is there could be a problem instance where your capital W is very, very huge. And in that case, this entire other part is essentially absorbed in this log W quantity. So the size of the input in that case, yes, Aryan, that's actually the point, that log W will be small. Okay. So now my question is, in such a scenario, is this a polynomial runtime? So if your S is log W, then does this algorithm run in polynomial time? Okay, Alok still thinks it's yes. Why is it yes? N is small, but W is huge, Alok. That's the problem. So we are in the regime. So remember, suppose N is very small. N is actually a constant, but W is very, very large, right? So then your S essentially boils down to log of W, but your running time is N times W, which is in fact 2 to the power of S, right? So so the point I'm trying to make here is that I can still represent W using log W bits, but the running time is linearly dependent on W. That is not linearly dependent on log W. So the running time is here exponential in the case where W is very, very large. Okay. So let me see but since W defines the problem size, isn't it polynomial? Yeah. So Alok, the point is W is not the problem size. Log W is the problem size. This is important to understand. Yeah. N is the log N. I mean, N is the problem size because clearly we need N times log N bits and all that. But let's say we are in a regime where N is really small, but W is really, really large. But still you can represent that using only log W bits. But the running time is horrible now. The running time is linearly dependent on W, which is exponential in the size of the input. Okay. So this algorithm, that is why in the worst case, this is not a polynomial running time. Okay. This is what I think somebody had already pointed this out. This is called a pseudo polynomial runtime. Okay. So in fact, for this problem, we don't know a polynomial time algorithm to solve it, which is like polynomial in both n and log W. We don't know such an algorithm. In fact, it's widely believed that such a thing does not exist. So you cannot have a purely polynomial runtime. Okay, but clearly this is a practical algorithm because typically, you know, the value of capital W will not be very large. So you can still get away with n times W. Okay, but theoretically, it's very important to understand that this is not polynomial runtime. Okay, so that's what I wanted to say. Let me stop the recording and